Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of Impact Talks. Today we have a great guest with us. We have Daniela Weitmann, the Managing Director of Converse. Now, usually I don't do the introductions. I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell the people what you do, what you're doing currently in your life, and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Luba, for inviting me here as well. Um, I usually love to split this answer in three. That is past, present, and future. And instead of the segmentation of personal, work, and academic, I think that your life is much more blended than just setting those segmentations. Yeah. So I was born in Rio, Brazil, born and raised. As we speak, I'm in Rio right now. And I come from a very stable family. I'm the youngest of three sisters, and with a very business mind dad, and a very artistic mom. And had a very stable childhood. Always in Brazil, going to the summer house every weekend. Really had a very stable childhood, which not necessarily is what I'm giving back to my kids, right? So, but we'll get there
Yeah.
later on. Uh, I I did do engineering. My dad is an engineer, and I always have been very intrigued about making the complex simple. That was what for me tempted for me to be an engineer. And after doing my master in science and engineering, I decided to search for a job on a corporate world, given the global component that the global corporations do have.
Why would you go after an engineering to corporates? What I would I would think that you would have to have some type of idea that you go for an MBA or business administration education instead of engineering.
Yeah, that's I've always been very curious, and during my master, I it was a bit of a different master in science degree. I did partner with a couple of companies during my masters to be able to do scientific testing in products while finding a way to drive profitable innovation on certain products, right? So the business aspect of the engineering has always been with me. Yeah, and when I was just about to graduate in my master, Wella at the time was looking into how to optimize their supply chain and operations in Latin America, and they were partnering with McKinsey, and McKinsey went to the best universities in Brazil to search for students that would like to lead this transformation for them, and I was one of the selected students, and started to work directly with hair cosmetics in on a very international, multi-country, and a multifunctional job. So that was the main kickoff of my corporate career, and I had quite a lot of liberty and flexibility and autonomy within that job to set up what is going to be the new business model of the future. Uh, so
Is that
so
is that
after
something normal when you just start at a corporate job? Because my impression was always when you first start, you kind of have to go through the grind. You don't have that much freedom. It doesn't, yeah.
I don't think it was normal. That to your point, Love, I think it was quite an amazing chance that I had. That I was given so much freedom and so much at least autonomy to test and learn. Some things I do believe that I developed quite a lot. Some other things I was quite junior. And today, if I look back, I see, wow, how did I do that way? And one of those was in management. I was a horrible manager, and immediately I was taking care of a big team.
Because how
And
many people were under your management and how old were you back then?
I was 23, yeah, 23. And actually, I did have a team of 10 to start with. I had managers of managers, and and I was not necessarily that much giving much love and caring to the team. I just had one idea in mind, was going on, and somehow that first job also taught me, well, I do need to take care of the team and bring a team along, not only use my intellect and influencing skills to drive strategy into implementation. So that was my main learning from that job, is that, well, find a way to develop people, to bring people along, um, to understand that the transformation do happen at the individual level. It doesn't matter if the strategy is right. You do need to bring the people along.
So, so a lot to unpack there. So you got the team, and then you say you've learned all these lessons. I've usually, when I look back at obviously how we're scaling our teams, I usually learn my lessons after something bad has happened. Did you learn your lessons like after something bad has happened, or was it just something gradual as you were scaling? How did you learn the lessons that you're saying right now?
Yeah, I believe it's much more of now that I reflect upon that time, I can see that I could have done a much better job. So it nothing really bad happened, but I now that I reflect back, I see, well, I could have done a much better job in bringing people along as a manager.
So do you have an
Uh,
example maybe for also the listeners to know what to avoid and what could be better?
Yeah, well, actually, I did not have like formal one-on-ones with my employees, for example, with my direct reports, right? I did not have necessarily a dedicated coaching session on their development. It would be less formal, more informal,
Yeah.
and I did not necessarily have a structured support on career development. It was much more informal. Not that this is bad, but I believe that nowadays I do have much better tools and more awareness of how I should at least help them to structure um, their development, their happiness at the job, their
Yeah.
day to day, to really have fun at work.
So so these one-on-ones, that's something you do weekly or monthly?
Nowadays, I
How
do I do weekly with all of my direct reports.
great. So that's actually a cool system. I don't do weeklies. We do team meetings, but we don't do weekly one-on-ones. You also mentioned coaching. Do you then do monthly coachings, or how does the coaching look like?
Yeah, it depends a lot on the person, and I usually like to give the ownership of those one-on-ones to the person,
Yeah.
that tell me what you need. What do you need to have? So it's an hour that, or half an hour, whatever they need. What do you need from me that will make you better at what you do? That
Yeah.
will make you a better person. Yeah. And the person can say, well, today I just don't need to talk about work. I just need to talk a bit about what is happening in this field of my life. Yeah. So it's more about give them the room to build, that you are here to help them. Yeah. And uh, and many times with some of my partners, the people I work together with, the one-on-ones are not necessarily in a room. We can have walk-in one-on-ones, right? We can go out to, well, let's exercise and use this time to exercise, and go for a walk while we talk. Let's
Oh yeah.
let's make sure that we do have this bonding moment anyway, because it's just giving the space that the meaningful conversations will flourish, and that's exactly what I would like to provide. uh, and you asked about how do you know when to provide coaching and what is the frequency.
Yeah.
I once learned some a tip about how to see who needs coaching or not. And imagine a matrix like that. On the vertical axis, you do have skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. if you are up on the axis, you do have the skill. You are skilled to do that job, or to go through that moment. And if you do not have, if you are down here, you are not skilled. Yeah. Imagine that on the horizontal line, it's will. It's do you want to do it? Yeah. So if you are going to the right, you want to do. You do have the incentive, the courage, the motivation. On the other side, you do not have the will to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. So if you don't have the skill, but you have the will, training may help this employee, right? So a lot of the coaching can be around, well, how can I provide you the technical training? How can I provide you the official training for you to be able to be skilled to do your job better? If you do not have the will, but you have the skill, it's much more about how can I inspire you? How can I coach you to start to get motivation and energy out of this? Because you know how to do it, you're just not doing it. Or if the person doesn't have both, it's much more about a meaningful discussion about what is next. Because if you do not want and you don't know, I cannot necessarily train you or coach you. You need to decide what to do. Probably it's a different job. And if you do have both, it's where I would love to bring all of the people I work with to skilled and with a motivation, because that's where magic happens. Yeah, it's where you can start to create more. You can start to error more, to give more room for risk taking, to stretch, develop, and do fun things together.
I like that matrix a lot. Didn't think about it that way yet. I think also, if I reflect about what most of the startups in our community do, and I think as a founder, I'm probably one of those as well, we focus very heavily on the technical part of it. Do you have this skill? And less on the motivation and willingness. So how do you know when the willingness is not there, and how do you coach that? Or is it just you ask questions, and how do you inspire that?
Yeah, this it differs from person to person, right? So usually at my current job, I do like to get back and anchor to the ethos of what the brand is, and the culture where I am. So we work with athletes, and usually if you're an athlete, whatever you tell me that will make me run a second faster, I take it.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's look. Sometimes you will tell me things that I will not like to hear. So if I put it myself, saying, look, I feel like an athlete. Tell me something that will make me run this 1 second faster. I may not like what I hear, but I would love you to tell me anyway. So I think that if you put it on you, saying that I'm willing to hear even things that are not that good, but I know that you care deeply about me.
Mm-hmm.
Then you open up this level of trust, that you start to have a meaningful challenge.
So
and develop.
You covered also the culture that you're in right now, because obviously Converse, very well known, quite also old as a company now, because it's been like a trend many years ago, and now again. I have Converse as well, but I've also saw the connection with Nike, which took me a while to understand, because I thought Converse was its own company. What, for the listeners, what's the connection with Nike? What's the culture of Converse? How mixed is it with Nike?
Yeah. Well, we jumped from Wella in Latin America to Converse, but we can get back there later
we'll
on.
get back in a bit. Sorry.
Converse, I usually say that is like the 100-year-old startup because it's over 100-year-old and it still feels like a startup. And it was acquired a while ago by Nike, and this acquisition enables us to still be together but independent. So Converse does have all of the attributes of a very independent, self-standing startup that can decide and can be a bit more agile around how to market the brand, how to position the brand, while we do have the benefit of all of the innovation background, all of the corporate infrastructure, all of the global infrastructure that Nike does have, yeah, including digital platforms and so on and so forth. So the culture, I would say, we can select the best parts of the more artistic culture that Converse does have, while maintaining and keeping the big corporation infrastructure in the background.
So it's not like, let's say, Pixar and the Disney acquisition. Pixar is very much its own Pixar, and the Disney acquisition, I don't think, did a lot. But was there an influence when, like, do you feel, obviously, as Converse, that there is an influence from Nike, or how does that work?
Well, there is an influence, and this influence does not necessarily impact or change what the brand stands for. So I believe that Nike always has been very clear that let's maintain the Converse brand intact. The Converse
Right.
brand is. So what can we do to provide infrastructure and support for us to operate globally with that brand, and not let it independent go bankrupt, but let's maintain the brand intact and what it means.
Yeah, that's sounds great. I'm a little bit skeptical about one part because I really want to cover it because I'm pretty sure one of our listeners will think that. But you said you guys function like a startup. How come you're saying that? Is it like, do you have a few employees per office that allows you to do that? Because obviously startup is like, I don't know, like maybe less than 10, 20 people, 30 people maybe, and really like trying to figure things out on a low budget. I can't imagine Converse going through the same experience, is it?
No, it's well, actually, in some areas yes, but in other areas not. So it's much more about to make a statement. Yeah, compared to the size of Nike, Converse is still a startup, and there
Okay.
is still a good level of freedom on how to position the brand, which with if you look into the consistent way that Nike does position the brand, it's more not rigid but controlled. Yeah,
Okay, I get it. So you still have open loops for the branding.
for the branding, and that's where you can test things a bit faster, I do believe, with Converse, especially if you are executing the brand or responsible for a brand on a local market. That is my
Yeah.
responsibility. I'm responsible for the north of Europe, Scandinavia, Benelux, and AGS, Austria, Germany, Switzerland.
Nice. Okay, so we skipped a lot. Let's go back to Brazil in the beginning. I think it was quite important to know those parts, just to give context as well
Yeah,
for me.
absolutely. And
But so we go back. When did you finish there? How old were you, and what was kind of, when did you know you were gonna move on to the next challenge?
yeah, so I did work quite some years at Wella, and the reason why I moved is that I met my husband, and he was an expat in Brazil and moved back to Sweden, and then I resigned and moved back with him. When I arrived in Sweden, one of the funny things is that, well, I said I do not necessarily speak Swedish, and I would love to, but right now I need to somehow find a job. And from the airport going home, I saw a big warehouse written Kraft Foods. I said, wow, Kraft Foods, American company. I will just give them a ring. I contacted them and said, look, you may not have a job for me, but this is what I've been doing. Would you when you have a job, please reach out. And they did. And when they did reach out, I was pregnant of my daughter. And
How many months
that
later did they reach out to you?
it was like 6 months later or something. So they did reach out. I was invited to an interview. I was pregnant at the time during the interview, and then they said, well, we do have a job within the chocolate category. We do need someone that is able to manage all of the functions and control the P&L of the chocolate brands here in Scandinavia. And as soon as I got back from maternity leave, which in Sweden you can split the maternity and paternity leave with the father, so we
Okay.
did split. Yeah, I was home for a couple of months. My husband was home for the other months, that did not intervene, and I got the job even if I was just about to have a daughter.
Because how long is maternity leave in Sweden in total?
13 months.
Wow, so you split that up in six and a half, or?
Approximately, I think that in this case it was 5 and 7. So he took, and then the other month I got a nanny, and to help at home because we both had careers, but at the same time we wanted to be home when our child was still a baby, and that was a big lesson for me as well. Coming from Brazil, where exception is the rule, I usually say, right? You do not have that much help from the state, from the government. Family need to help you out.
Yeah.
When I went to Sweden, and that the social democracy and the gender equality is so ingrained in how society operates and works, and I never felt that as a woman my career was impacted by my gender, nor my husband ever questioned if he would stay at home or not. We would decide that what is best for our family and for his and my career at the time. So that was where this contrast really started to ignite in me an interest around, well, I need to support women to grow in their leadership. Later on, when I moved out of Sweden, I saw, well, it's not everywhere that it's like the equality how in Sweden I experienced. Then I had my second child there. We built a house. I was for a while, and Kraft Foods, Lova, had a philosophy on talent that if you are on a fast track development within the company, you should do 2-2-2. That means you should work on 2 functions. You should work on 2 territories or geographies, or you should work on 2 categories.
Yeah.
Categories being chocolate and coffee, or chocolate and snacks.
Isn't that like multitasking? Isn't that going against the cliche of focus on one?
No, it's not necessarily simultaneously. You should, along your career with the company,
Okay, like
learn from 2 points of view, function-wise, or 2 points of view on a category, because they do have quite different consumer motivations. Or from, if you put yourself on a big corporation on a more global role that is more strategic, you probably do not know how your decisions are impacting the territory that is dealing with the consumer face-to-face. So if you have a territory role and a more centralized strategic role, or if you have a chocolate that is more that has a different consumer motivation behavior than a coffee does have, I think it's very complementary for you to be a better leader in the future. Yep.
Okay, like that. So it's pretty much the philosophy of, if you're a leader, you should also be in the trenches to know how your decisions affect.
Exactly. So you do know, well, if I've been in that seat, I know that my decision now, what are the consequences for that roles over there. Yeah.
Clear.
And you create a broader, a more like a stable and wise leader. And at that time, Irene was targeting to have both top line growth and bottom line growth, with the bottom line growth exceeding the top line growth. And she was succeeding quite well, but the bottom line growth was not as sharp as the top line growth. Yeah. And lots of attention was shifted towards the operational structure of how Kraft worked across the globe. And functions like procurement, or where we put the money and investment, or supply chain, were high demand of talent. And I was invited at the time. Well, would you like to lead our procurement team in Scandinavia? And I said, well, never did procurement in my life, and procurement was mainly necessarily looking how can we shift from paying suppliers towards leveraging partnerships long term.
What's the difference there?
You can focus on how you procure the goods that comes into your end product, and your end product can be something tangible it's a chocolate bar, let's say a chocolate bar, and you can have the direct materials that goes into the chocolate bar, but you can also have what is the infrastructure that you need to have to produce this chocolate bar, and also what is the how you're going to market, what are the creative agencies that are going to talk to you about the benefits of the chocolate. So you have to procure and partner with several suppliers in order to make your business operational. And many times we look into those on a very short-term basis. You just negotiate short-term contracts to low down your costs. When Kraft was and still is one of the most advanced companies, that early on they looked into saying, let's make sure that we leverage long-term partnerships with suppliers. We do not want just to squeeze creative agencies for them to give us an advertising content and we will pay less. We want to understand how can we compartmentalize and decouple the process, so whatever we can optimize cost, we are going to optimize. Whatever we need to shift and pay more to develop an innovation of how to do things, we're going to do it. Yeah. So we looked for long-term partnerships, and that for me created wow, it's almost like I'm developing small business processes, much more than negotiating. I'm not here negotiating with suppliers. I'm here developing the future of their business to enable our future business. Yeah.
Okay.
So it became quite interesting, and from that role, I was invited to go to Zurich, to the headquarters in Zurich of Kraft Foods in Europe, and be responsible for the creative agencies partnerships.
Like globally or just in Zurich?
Europe, for all of the categories, chocolate, coffee, and chewing gum, etc. And this job became quite known in Europe by the other companies, because we found a way to map those creative agencies and see which, for a certain job, which of them would be the best one to provide that certain partnership and service for us. And Nike heard about it, and I was invited by Nike to set up this strategic partnership function.
Well, I'm confused. What's so unique about it? Don't other companies, no other company ever did it?
No, they did it, but it was very much more focused on the negotiation of a certain contract and service, rather than, well, let's look not only on the price of what we give, but can we change processes, and can we change the way we build the innovation for the future, right?
Okay.
So it was it was more of a long-term way of selecting suppliers. I wouldn't choose, normally, I wouldn't, if I would go and do a bidding, I would choose just the cheapest with that quality specifications. In that case, we were not looking for price as the defining criteria. We were looking into well, tell me more about it. Can we do that in less time? Or can we do that with less waste? Or can we do that
Oh,
with
okay. So,
just sustainable materials? So we did have a much more sophisticated set of attributes and criteria for us to buy a certain product or service that would be
yeah.
more long term, looking into what the company wants to have in the future.
How did other companies find out about a procurement process is so private usually?
Yeah, but well, suppliers do talk, right? So and we participated in a couple of congresses. Well, headhunters went out and said, well, Nike does need to develop to set up the function first in Europe and be able to. Nike had high interest into, well, develop premium retail. It was in the beginning of Nike having their shops in Europe, and they wanted to, how can we have really an amazing premium experience when we come to our shops, or how our stores, how can we do also have this same experience, premium experience, when you go into our digital platform. Same thing, how can we have how can we manage our creative agencies, or how can we manage our employee training services. So if you segment the amount of spend that a company does have in Europe, how can we rethink the way we do it
Yeah.
in order to create better partnerships? Do we have to buy things when it's when we want to provide some furniture to employees, or are we going to look into more of a circular economy of renting furniture and later donating it to somewhere else? So we started to rethink processes and partnerships as well when I moved to Nike.
And so just different questions I have there, completely different. But the first one, which is a bit more relevant to the podcast. So how does a startup go about approaching a procurement person to, for instance, let's say, let's talk about us, because obviously we've experienced it in the last 5 years now. So we very hardly focused on machine learning based algorithms to produce video production very fast. And in the beginning, it was extremely hard for us to break through and explain that, this isn't just like an agency that makes videos. Like, this is a new technology that's going to disrupt it. Costs go down, it goes much faster. But we found that every time the person on the front line would understand, procurement would just say, no, they're not part of our, established suppliers. We're not going to do that. And that's when we started building processes of sometimes 1 to 2 years of negotiation just to get through to procurement and explain, hey, this is something different. But what would your tips be, obviously having been in the role of procurement? How do you look at that? How do you explain maybe sometimes procurement saying or not looking deeper, or could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something about, well, how do you break through the procurement barrier that many big companies do have on startups, right? Because one of the procurement trends that I'll tell why I say was, is how can you take out the complexity of the amount of suppliers that you do have to be able to really develop strong partnerships with the big fewer, bigger, better suppliers. Yeah. But then if you do that, you eliminate like the richness and the innovation and the flexibility and the agility of startups that are coming up. So I believe that there are a couple of things that you can do as a startup to really break through. One of them is that more and more companies that do want to keep on developing themselves, the innovation doesn't come necessarily for owned roles. You do need to partner with your suppliers to drive innovation. So you may need to talk to the procurement team and say, look, I would love to talk about who is responsible for innovation in your company. who can we do you have any innovation day? Can we provide you some can we come and organize some talks? Try to understand what is the benefit for the company, right? So for example, what always opened up for me, wow, now I'm interested. Yes, I'm passionate about women in leadership. I would love to hear stories about women-owned companies that would do something different to provide that kind of equality. Or if you would come and say, I do know a different way of turning around that this thing would spend 5 weeks in your process, I can do that in 2 days. That will pick up my attention.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that if you say something that will really that that is a hurdle for the company you are talking to, that is exactly where you do have a commonality. They are interested, you are interested in partnering. And from there, you will find a way if it's interesting enough for both of you. Yeah, you find a way to bring and introduce, to bring and do a test pilot. So another thing that helped quite a lot, and I always have been a big promoter of testing, is that, well, all companies do have a couple of territories that are doing super well, can be your test. Let's test that within the Scandinavian market. Let's test this supplier or this partnership within that category. And if the pilot does go well, you can develop further the partnership. So I've been quite open all the time for new ideas, because it's out of those new ideas and startups that you will get probably the biggest boom of innovation. Coming over.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing the trend nowadays that there's more actual innovation managers within corporates. So I really liked what you said with either approach the procurement team or ask them if there's an innovation team, because that's usually how we eventually got noticed within the company. And then obviously the tools that you just said, I think, are super practical. And then
and getting through the innovation door, right, Luba? Getting through the environment door, getting through the lead time door. And now Corona is showing, right? COVID is showing us that we do need to diversify, getting through a bit more about the risk taking, the agility door. So there are ways for you to go in, and do not exclude the procurement, but it can be the step 2 of the process if you do not have a traction on the step 1. And I say that having been in a procurement role, I do believe that for me the ideal procurement partner will be the one that will be curious enough to hear, to always keep an ear open for the innovation piece.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, shifting a little bit back as well, because we went a bit faster. At one point you mentioned, so you got to Sweden. There's 6 months in between you and getting that job. That's a big step, coming from Brazil, which is, Rio is, I think, a bit warmer than Sweden. So the language barrier, the climate, and then obviously you didn't have a job yet. So what happened in those 6 months? I think it's also relevant with the times. Unemployment rates are going up. How did you eventually find a job? I can imagine it wasn't super easy, or how did it go?
Yeah, it's when I look back, I had it was quite liberating, the move. Yeah, and all of the moves that I did from country to country had kind of a liberating aspect connected to it. The move to Sweden was very special because I was choosing a new home, a country to call home. I'm today a Swedish citizen. I did put all my effort into learning Swedish, But before I did, I always had been working and or studying and had been very active all my life. My dad and my mom raised me as well, never depend on someone, depend by choice, not by need. So I said, well, I need to do something. I cannot just stay here and do not work. While my husband to be is working out there, and it's more about you can do everything in life, but not everything simultaneously. While I was learning Swedish and setting up a family, I tried at the time to, well, can I do, which kind of jobs can I have, right? And the more you look into the amount of foreigners that were getting as exile, and it was not my case, right? But that they were exiled in Sweden, you did see quite well academically developed people, the high academically developed people like engineers and doctors that could not get a job and would end up working as taxi drivers. And that was the reality that suddenly I was faced, right? Because in Brazil, if you do have an university degree, you get a job at your level. Well, it was not necessarily the same when I looked into at the time, there were lots of people coming from Iraq and from Syria in Sweden, and my Swedish lessons I was taking as a social democratic country, they were provided by the government. So my colleagues in the class, they were more coming from exile and not necessarily by marriage, having moved there. And you could see that they could not get the job at the level of education they had or at the level of jobs they had before. And at that time I was thinking, well, I don't think this is fair. And it starts to burn something inside you, right? You move from Brazil, where social classes difference is huge, but you always grow up thinking, well, you can be whatever you want to be. And you arrive in Sweden and you see, well, there are people coming here, the government is giving everything, but they necessarily are not able to immediately get to where they came from. So more than the temperature difference and the climate difference, it was much more about, well, how society is organized. That for me was the biggest clash. I usually used to say that in Brazil you have 40-50 touch points a day. You say hi to your neighbor, you say hi to the person selling you the newspaper, you give the money to the person when in the traffic light when you drive. You talk to people a lot, and you have those touch points and connections, right? True meaningful connections. Well, when you go to Sweden, the social distancing, and it refers a lot to what's happening today with COVID, right? The social distancing and emotional distancing is immediately much bigger. You do not have those touch points, right? It's not that fluid, the connection with people. So for me, it was more how society is organized, and I learned through just living there. And back to finding a job, would that be difficult or not? I was thinking, well, in the beginning, let's not think about the end state. Let's see what can I do now to contribute so I will find a job at the level that I would like to have. So while I was studying Swedish, I volunteered to a job at a museum that was very close to my house, and I said, well, I will try to explain this museum and do the tours in Swedish so I can practice my Swedish, even if I didn't speak Swedish that well. I forced myself, and I said, well, that 3 months there helped me a lot to be able to confidently speak on a corporate environment again, or whatever I would like. But I believe that a tip you asked what helped me to get back and get my confidence back in positioning myself in the job market. I think I didn't come with just one thought about what I wanted to do. I was open to, well, I may work in big corporations. I may find my own company, or I may work on non-governmental organization. So I do not know necessarily where it is going to be my entry door. But what I know is that I will try to develop to be able to do the best when I get there.
You weren't scared of going into the museum and speaking Swedish, just having arrived to Sweden?
Oh no, it's because actually that is the beauty, right? The tourists that were there, I will probably not meet them every day. So you are also you can speak a very raw Swedish and practice it, and that was how I could also learn from the culture there as well. And uh, and I was quite lucky that when I got my first job there, it was quite a good job, and I decided from day one. I said, well, I will speak Swedish at work. I
Yeah.
will force myself to speak Swedish at work, right? And that gave me already also a better confidence that I'm integrated into this society.
So you think that obviously taking that step to really smoothen out your language and then being open for all kinds of different jobs is eventually what kind of put that energy out to find that job within 6 months that you eventually found?
Yeah. As long as you are still, you do feel that you are developing and moving forward. Yeah, I believe that that gives you the energy
And did
as
you
well.
send in a lot of applications out? Did you call a lot of companies, or was it just like,
No, I didn't. It was
well,
just this one that I said that I contacted, and they called back.
wow. Okay, cool. So then the other question I had was, so then you moved to Zurich, but at this point you have children and your husband, I'm assuming, is working in Sweden. So how does that work?
Yeah, so um, it's that's where I first faced again. How do you manage two careers when you're a couple, right? And we discussed, and he by all means he always said, look, I give you help. Go, let's go there, and we find a way. Move with the kids. I had a nanny at the time, and for I had a nanny for 10 years. That's another one that probably we can talk a bit more about that. And I moved to Zurich, and he stayed in our house in Sweden, and he was commuting over the weekends
And
to.
so how long is the flight there?
Oh, it's a 2 hours and a half. So it was quite tough on him to be commuting, and we just had built a beautiful house in Sweden. So it all came a bit too fast. Uh, but at the same time, he didn't challenge at all. He said, "That's what you want, Danielle." I said, "Yes, that's what I want. Can we accommodate that in our family?" And he said, "Well, we can." I accommodated moving to Sweden and setting up my life there, so we could accommodate my move to Switzerland. And what we didn't know is that right after Switzerland, I would get the Nike offer and move to Netherlands
Yeah.
a year and a half afterwards. And it was in the move to Netherlands that he did take a piece of he did take time out from his job while still employed, and went to move together with us. So we were all a family under one roof again.
Because right now
So
you're living in the Netherlands then?
I'm living in Netherlands right now. Yeah, yeah. And
Nice.
I'm working in Berlin, and I work in
Yeah.
Germany. So I commute nowadays, and the family stays in Netherlands.
Yeah, because I read Berlin, so I was like, I didn't know you lived in the Netherlands. Very interesting.
Yeah. So we have to cope with quite some logistic challenges, but in our family, what we decide is that, well, let's always look into what's the best solution for the family, and we try to manage that way. So when I moved to Switzerland, um, I didn't like it. Let's
Really? Why?
and I'm not talking necessarily about the job. The job was amazing. The company, I love craft foods, and I'm forever an ambassador of the craft brands and the craft corporate culture. I love it. The moving there as a mother, as on a high level job with two small kids. My kids were really really young at the time,
How
and the
old
nanny,
were
of
they?
course. I think that they were 4 and 5, 4 and 5, and I moved there with the intention of staying long term. So I put them in local school. So they had to move from the Swedish that they were in Sweden to local like a Swiss German school, and in the support that you get from the system and society in Switzerland is much different than the support that you get in Sweden. That you can leave the kids in Sweden the whole day in the kindergarten. There is much more flexibility at work, that you work from home, or that you leave early one day, the father leaves earlier the other day, as long as you deliver your job, right? And
Yeah.
in Switzerland is much more rigid, the structure. And as a single mother or a single parent there, I found it very, very difficult to cope with all of my roles as a mother, as a wife, as a responsible for the household and my job. So at the end, when Nike called out, I was really thrilled to move to Nike for what Nike represents, but also um, the situation in Switzerland was not sustainable. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to share that, because many times you think, well, it's always amazing to move countries and to move to a better job. It sometimes doesn't work out for the family.
Honestly, what you're saying right now is exactly the experience I had with Belgium and then moving to the Netherlands. As we were growing our company back then, it just always seemed like Belgium was behind all the innovation. The government taxed the lower startups more than if you were a bigger institution, because obviously all the European institutions were in Brussels. And after a while, we were just hitting these ceilings, and I just said, that's it. This is just not the way to operate as a government. And even though I'm Belgium born and raised and had this emotional connection to my country, um, we eventually made the decision to move to the Netherlands after a mentor said that when you're running a business, you have to look at a country from a business point of view. And if they are your boss and they treat you that way, then maybe they shouldn't be your boss. um, so I had that experience. It resonates so much with me. And when I moved to the Netherlands, it was just day and night. The I think within 6 months the business doubled. It was such an exponential growth. It was crazy. And we were just nowadays I think we're hitting 20 to 25% growth yearly. Um, so it's just the country has done so much for us, and we are now looking at like the next country to scale. But then for me, loyalty is a big thing. So I always say within the team also, look, we are looking to scale to other countries, but I really want to keep our head office in the Netherlands, just because of the support system of the government. Because we're now looking, for instance, at LA, right? Because we're in the video. Um, we have a lot of companies that we work with in LA as well, so I have very late nights. But you, I'm very scared of going to the US just because, you know, you hear all the stories about medical insurance and how the government treats you. And I'm just so happy in the Netherlands with all of that. So yeah, we're exploring all of that. But what you're saying about countries very well resonates with me.
Yeah, yeah, and I just have to repeat what you said. When I moved, and the whole family, when we moved as a family to Netherlands, it started to feel right again.
Yeah.
That you do have a lot of support. It's a much easier place to live. The touch points and connections with neighbors, with the community around you, community of support is much higher as well. Yeah, and and that's one of the reasons why after a while, after being at Nike and after moving from Nike to Converse and after Converse being promoted to be headquartered in Berlin, we decided as a family that, well, the family stays in Netherlands and I commute to Berlin.
Isn't that a 6 hour commute?
If it's by car, yes, I do fly. Sometimes I take the train, but door to door, it's more or less 6 hour commute. Yeah.
Isn't that intense? Because I'm assuming you then sleep in Berlin for the week, and then for the weekend you come back, right?
Yeah, it was quite intense. I would go on Tuesday morning or Monday mornings, right? And I get back on Thursday evenings. Now it's a Corona time. That is not happening, which is great for my family and the kids. But at the same time, you do it, but not for too long. I would say, yeah. But what I love about being based in Netherlands, and if you have kids, is well, I do know that they can cycle to school. I do know they can cycle back.
Yeah.
I do know that if something happens, if the bike is broken, someone else is going to help. They can cycle to football training, and it's an easier life. So you can accommodate life a bit better.
But so how does that work with your children now? So do they speak Swedish? Do they speak, well, in Zurich, it's, I'm assuming, German? Or are they now Dutch because they were so young when you were moving?
Yeah, we did keep quite a good consistency on which languages to speak to them. I always spoke Portuguese to them, Brazilian Portuguese, with an accent from Rio. So if they speak, you can see that they are from Rio, and that they would. We had the rule that you speak back on the language that the person addresses you. So I always spoke to them in Portuguese. They would speak back in Portuguese always, otherwise I would not understand. And
Yeah.
my husband would always speak in Swedish. They would answer back in Swedish. So now we just have one more language in the mix since Dutch is there, and we usually have Dutch friends. Or English because they go to international school and they speak English. But the language at the dinner table is Swedish and Portuguese, and with the people around us is or Dutch or English.
And how does it then work between you and your husband? Do you speak English with each other?
Yeah, well, actually, we divorced after a while being in Netherlands, and the divorce was for us. We usually say that, well, we even have a divorce ring because it was quite a natural process, and we are still family, just with a different logistics as a family. He moved back to Sweden, so he lives in Stockholm. Our kids are with him now since I'm in Brazil. So we created like this two households family that he's in Sweden. The kids are going there every month and staying with them during holidays, and we stay based in Netherlands. The other times we are very close friends.
So it's a bit more stable for the children as well.
Yeah. So I believe that we are speaking both languages at home.
But so just out of interest, so then when you were speaking, very relevant to me, that's why I'm asking, but so you're talking in English, but then with your children you're talking Portuguese.
In Portuguese, yes.
And so that's like 3 languages going through the household, and then obviously now Dutch, so that's 4 languages going through the household. Is that not messing up the children a little bit? Like how does that work?
No, it doesn't. And everybody asks, but it doesn't. You have to experience one day. You come to, when I'm back in Netherlands, you come to have dinner at my place one day. So you're going to see. It doesn't, on the contrary. I believe it helps them even to learn more languages in the future. You just have to keep a very consistent approach to how to speak. you can see that when they started to get into being teenagers, they are now 12 and 14, and they started to be a bit embarrassed if I would, in front of their friends, speak to them in Portuguese. Yeah, they would.
Really?
But at the same time, you just need to keep on doing it. They don't have to be embarrassed that I'm Brazilian. They need to just make sure that they honor our agreement, that is to speak Portuguese with each other to keep the language. And the same way when the dad speaks in Swedish, and I believe that we overcame that phase, but it goes in phases, right? When they are very young, they like to have a secret language. Now when they become teenagers, they were a bit embarrassed. They want to conform with what the others are doing.
Yeah.
And I believe that you just have to be consistent through the phases the kids go through as well.
Interesting. So they keep talking Portuguese to you and then Swedish to their father. Do you also then share the history and everything? So do they also feel Brazilian or do they feel Dutch? Because Brazil has such a rich history. So is it just a language or is it
Yeah, well, we celebrate the Brazilian traditions and the Swedish traditions, and we overlay with a bit of the traditions of the country we live. So in Brazil, so they do capoeira as a sport as well. Capoeira, it's a Brazilian
martial arts. Why not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah. Well, because jiu-jitsu it's a bit harder to find in the city I live, but they had capoeira, and they get a lot of the rhythm, they get a lot of the tradition of respect, and work and be together in several different ages and so on. They do celebrate carnival, and there are several things that they do celebrate and understand how it is in Brazil. In Brazil, we usually talk a bit louder than in Sweden, so they do know that when our Brazilian family is together, people talk on top of the others. That doesn't mean that they don't respect. That's a bit of a cultural nuance of how you interact. And they celebrate the Swedish traditions, especially when it comes to Lucia, comes to Christmas, New Year's Eve, summer, midsummer, and so on. And also with the Sinterklaas now in Netherlands as well.
And so do they feel like there's a clash in nationalities and who they are as people? What if you would ask them what do they feel like? Do they feel like they're Swedish, Dutch, Portuguese?
Yeah, so that is referring back to when I said that I grew up in Rio. I was born and raised in Rio, and I had a very stable childhood. First time I went abroad was when I was 15 years old. I always had been very much the surroundings of my city, that is my world. At the age 15, I went out of this world. They grew up knowing that they are from Brazil and Sweden, that they traveled and lived in Sweden, lived in Switzerland, lived in Netherlands, and to have that anchor quite strong from Brazil. So I believe that they feel, if you ask them, they feel that they are Swedish and Brazilian, and that they feel really truly citizens of the world. Wherever you're going, if you ask where do you want to live in the future, they will answer, Victoria will answer, oh, I would like to go to Africa. My son will say, every time they say something different, and that doesn't mean that they don't like where they come from. It's more about, well, that is how they got wired as they grew up.
So
right?
They're really global citizens in that sense.
Yeah. They do not necessarily have the barriers, because for me it's like, well, I grew up in that place. Probably I would like to get and grow old in that place, but they do not have that to get back to where they were born necessarily.
That's so interesting. Anyway, so now we revert back to the transition from Zurich to the Netherlands. That's where we stopped. So I've been doing these podcasts. I think we did almost 10, I think, at this point. But every single time we're somewhere coming in the story to I was headhunted. That's like the common thread coming when people, are in the positions that you are. Um, and I'm always fascinated about how these people find you, especially before the LinkedIn era. It wasn't that easy. So, what is your theory? Like, what is it that you do that makes a headhunter call you or message you? Where do they come from, and how come not everybody's getting headhunted?
Yeah, so I'm I'm a believer that whatever you do that very well now, right? Bring your A game. To give your energy in doing great where you are. Because if you just search for headhunters saying that what you can do, you will not be searched, right? Because actually, if you do well what you do now, if you partner well with people, someone is going to give your name. If they are asked to a headhunter, the headhunter will come to you. So if you want to stay in the field you are, do very well what you do now, that the word will go across, and eventually you're going to be called by a headhunter. Then you may be open to hear what they have to say or not. In this case, I was quite open, and I know that in this case, Luva, it was a previous boss of mine that had just left Kraft Foods,
Oh,
gave my name as someone that he really liked to work with. Uh, and the Kraft does have a reputation of building amazing leaders out of that field, right? Out of the procurement and sourcing. So
yeah,
it was two things. I was at a company that did have a reputation of really building amazing skill set and leaders in that field, plus doing a great job and leaving the people around me knowing that they can vote for me if a headhunter asks, do you have someone to indicate? So in
yeah,
that case, is that. So, but you may ask, well, and if you want to change industries, I did change industries quite a lot, or if you want to change your role, your function, or if you're a startup, you would like to change fields, whatever, right?
yeah,
But if you would like to change your function, I would say that you then probably need to start participating on events, on congress or networks in the function you want to be, and see how can you really make relevant to that function the work you do, and probably be an active person within that network. And start keep on doing the good work in that field. Then it's an easier stepping stone to move and change and function. So one example is that if I'm working in procurement, let's hypothetically say,
yeah,
and I would like to work within the digital space in the future, digital business, I can probably uh, take a segment of my procurement work and be an expert within the digital piece, and profile myself as a digital expert. Then I can easily bridge that headhunters are going to see me as a digital expert within my business and subsegment, and I can
yeah.
take a digital role in the future. So it's if we squeeze it all, be good in what you do nowadays. Keep an eye out there, and be clear about what you're interested or not. Um, that you can have a good headhunting season.
Yeah. So the headhunter then finds you in Zurich, and then they pretty much just tell you, hey, we have a position for you in the Netherlands, and you just accepted and moved, or how does that process go?
No, I did go through a screening, and after that screening, I went through the whole interview process within the Nike world, which is a pretty lengthy one. I had more than 10 interviews.
How long is
And
that process? So for our recruitment, when we recruit people full time, we have a 3 week process with multiple stages. How long is like a process with a Nike or something?
It can take 3, 4 months, or
Oh,
even
wow.
even longer, right? So it has been quite a long process, and you go through the process, right? So you are part of one candidate, as any other candidate would be. Um, and that's a bit it. What I believe the headhunter brings extra is because the uh, uh, in this case, it was a boutique headhunting company, a very small one. Another example of Nike working with a startup. They are a very small boutique company, but they have a niche that they work with a couple with certain profiles of leaders, and they are specialized in that. So instead of Nike owning capabilities to do that search, they partner with this company, this startup, to be able to help to find those leaders that are very well connected in Europe and abroad. What the headhunting company does also help you is to how can they give me enough insights about the company I'm going to go in order for me to hit the floor running. So they help not only the company, but they help the candidate, the people, the person they approach, saying that, well, in this company, that's the culture. Make sure that that's a bit of the future you're going to look at when you arrive.
Cool. So that's one of the most detailed answers on that. So I really appreciate that. Really helps. So then Nike approaches you. What's the position they approach you for? And then how were the first months of getting on board and moving? How did that look like?
So I was the position was the head of procurement for Europe, EMEA, and I would be reporting into the global head of procurement. And the procurement, again, in the sense we are looking into how we're going to maximize strategic partnerships with suppliers, and the that position was not necessarily set up in Europe, and it was quite of a hot seat because 5 persons had been in that role before and could not set up the
Wow.
procurement processes correctly in Europe. And my question during the interview process was, well, what are the 3 things that I do need to accomplish in the first 3 months to be able to not be the sixth one to move away? Yeah, I just wanted to know that.
Yeah.
And I got it pretty clear. Well, I needed to make sure that whatever strategy I would develop would be enabling the company strategies and the business strategies in the region. I did have to bring people along and partner and make sure that I would align those strategies. I would need to bring also short-term impact and long-term value. So I would always look into whatever actions I would have in future through those 3 angles. Is it enabling strategy? Do I keep leadership and people informed and do I drive them through with me in the process? And the third one, do I bring impact now and long term? Um, the good thing is that those 3 targets I had, they talk quite well with my strengths, right? As an engineer, I usually say that I make the complex simple. So I could find ways to bring strategy to which are the plans and plans into impact and results, and talk exactly step by step about what that would be. I love to develop meaningful relationships with people, so maintaining people informed and bringing them along and finding win-win situations, it's something that I love doing and I do well. So I've anchored on those two. And I did set up a new team and made sure that, well, my boss is helping me to bring the best people in the industries, and my boss has my back if I do need to call it out, for some support and remove roadblocks and so on. So we did quite a great job. And one example here is that I went back to the same headhunter that brought me to the company, and I said, I want to hire my future bosses to be part of my team. And we
How does that work? What do you mean with your future? As in people that are so great that they would eventually...
they will be my bosses, right? In 5 years, 10 years time. And at the time they said, well, but we do not hire that level people reporting to you. We hire the level that you are. I said, well, let's try. I would love to get and hire to take care of the retail business, someone that is the best in retail, regardless of the industry in the world, or someone that is the best, that not necessarily has been the best. So I do not necessarily need to know what they did. I need to know what they think and they're going to do. Someone from agencies, creative agencies, who is a person that is the best in their field, or someone that is the best in consulting partnerships. So this company that brought me in, we selected 4 persons. And today they are at the same level that I am within the Nike world.
So how was it like finding them, onboarding them, convincing them to be in, I guess what the boutique agency said, a lower position than what they normally are? How is that process?
Yeah, but we didn't bring them to a lower position that they were. So, for example, to take care of our retail business, we brought someone from Burberry that was doing an amazing premium job at retail at the time, and an ability to seamless deal with the offline and online world quite well. And Nike needed a lot of digital experience in the area, so we brought this person from Burberry. That had the raw material, the potential, the mindset to be my boss in the future, but was still quite junior and quite agile and not really married to rigid processes, but with a great experience in premium retail. So when this person came in, it was a he. He would immediately he could be immersed and into the retail leaders at Nike without people looking at him. Almost, I usually say the supporting function syndrome. On the opposite, he was almost the authority within how premium retail should be. So people would turn to him and take out that barrier about, well, do we have to put procurement in the process like it is a hurdle? Well, we need to go through him because the guy knows his stuff, and he's facilitating. So it's changing the perception of the role. The same thing happened with the person we brought to take care of creative agencies and marketing agencies in general. It's about she had experience in working within several agencies, so she knew which parts of the processes could be optimized on the briefing stage, or how could we probably decouple some things that we could already execute and produce that were a bit faster and so on. So when we brought those persons, they were immediately absorbed. They didn't have an organ rejection kind of reaction from the company when they arrived.
And so what's it like having that type of people in your team? I can imagine it can be intimidating, or it's hard to get different types of personalities that are that strong aligned. How did you handle that?
Well, I believe that is why it's so important to have, in this case, to have a great headhunter, because this company, what they helped is that do they have the behavior and mindset that will enable them to work on a team. So do you know when someone is humble, but at the same time does have the swagger that they know their stuff super well, but is still humble to partner and to listen to what you have to say? So I think that all of us do have a bit of that. Is that, well, I know I'm good, but well, tell me, you are willing to listen because you can even get better, because they're not good in everything. They're much better in that space that you don't know anything about. So I think that there was always this kind of underlying curiosity, underlying being humble, or being willing to get better. So this partnership was quite magic. And an example about why this became super interesting is that 2 years leading the function, we could really bring amazing savings to go on bottom lines. But before all, we could bring improvement in the process of how procurement was ingrained into the strategy of the company. There is an organization that is called Global Procurement Leaders, and we got as a team an award for the best global procurement team in that year. It was 2015. So we went to London to receive this award in 2015.
Wow, had no idea. That's so cool. But so the team gets onboarded. What happens next in Nike?
So well, we did put the procurement into the stage. So that was not, which was great. I always wanted, when I joined Nike, I said, well, I'm a business person and I love to be in procurement. What I want to know is that can I get back to own the P&L and be in the business again if I join Nike, right? Because if I get in through the procurement drawer, doesn't mean that I'm going to stay in procurement forever. I would love to, as I develop, to go into owning the business again. And my manager supported, and my set of sponsors did support my career development in that space. So I got my general manager job at Converse, and I was responsible at the time to integrate Scandinavia, Benelux with Scandinavia, and to transition Scandinavia market back to Converse ownership. It was a distributor that was taking care of the brand in Scandinavia.
Oh, okay.
So I had to take back the business from a distributor model to an owned model again, and to merge both. And later on, when I was assigned AGS, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, I had to integrate the three business in one, headquartered out of Germany. And with that, I regained back the ability to own a P&L, to be able to be responsible for all lines of the P&L, to the costs of my team and my operational business, to the revenue that I'm providing to the company, to the EBIT that I'm giving back to the company, and to the health of my business in general. So that is something that I'm very thankful for the Nike corporation for enabling that, someone that comes in through a supporting function to move into to becoming a general manager of a brand on a territory.
Because that was then your kind of first time really becoming general manager of pretty much the whole company. How was that transition? Wasn't it scary or something?
Well, I usually love to think that if you do not feel something in your stomach, is because it's not stretching you enough, right? So you have to feel something, but at the same time you have to feel that you can do it, right? So I do believe that the procurement world, you do need to be quite independent into managing short-term, long-term profits and also financial benefits. You do need to know a strategy quite well. And I did so many functions before, so it's more about, well, now it's just owning the P&L instead of advising on P&L.
Okay.
That is the difference. But all in all, it's it's not rocket science, right? You just need to make sure that you do understand what are the roles of all functions and orchestrate it well to take the best out of each of the roles.
And so that's the position you have right now?
Yeah, so that's the position I have right now, and I'm already in that role. Well, I had three roles around being a general manager. First Benelux, then Northern Europe, that is Benelux, Scandinavia, and now Benelux, Scandinavia, and Austria, Germany, Switzerland. So growing in the territory and responsibility and revenue, um, and um, and well, 5 years. It's a year that I start to get ants on my pants to see what is going to be the new development and what I'm going to do next after this role.
Are you looking at a more global position afterwards, maybe? Would that be even interesting to you?
Yeah. So when when I moved away from Sweden, I was quite impressed after moving from Sweden to Switzerland of what how difficult it was for women to go up in their leadership position with all of the life happening around. Yeah. So when I joined Nike, I founded in EMEA at EHQ in our European headquarters the Women Network to be able to provide not only coaching but exposure and training to women. So we are going to help women to grow to higher levels of the organization,
Is that
right? So I had
only internally or also for external suppliers and stuff like that?
Yeah, in this case, it's only internal, right? So we did set up. I'm a co-chairing the Women Network, and we do have more than 2,000 members in the network, and we provide not only events, ability to network, but ability to train and to share, and we shed the light on on demystifying what a career path can be for women. So we enable women to take a bit more risks, and not only towards women, right? Bringing men along to support as ambassadors and enablers of equality. And so I've been always very active into the women in leadership part of the business. So if last year I started to already feel I need to do something else because I'm doing that for quite a while as a general manager. So I looked into a couple of external trainings around can I pay back what I know and what I've learned in corporate world, having worked in three big corporations and in very different geographies, in three different industries, and being active within the women world. Can I pay it back and help the women voice in organizations? And I got selected for a training that is called W50, that is sponsored by Banco Santander. Santander Bank, that helps and gives training for women to be part of company boards. And the training was in UCLA Anderson, so I was super happy to be selected, one of the 50 women that they select. You cannot pay yourself or buy yourself into the training; you need to be selected. And after I went to that training, I really started to think, well, I probably do not want to have something bigger or global role. Back to your question, I would love to position myself on my next, not my next move, but my next 7 years. I would love to do something with a bit more purpose than just launching the new collection of the season. Yeah. So right now, as you ask, do I want something bigger? Not necessarily bigger. I would love something that is really meaningful, really on purpose. If you see what
More
COVID is
purpose.
happening, it's more about how can we make our world better? Can I use whatever I know, whatever I can do to help a better world. So I'm still in the process of finding this out,
Yeah.
which is an interesting phase to be.
I really like where we are now in the conversation because one of our last our last event got canceled due to Corona at Mobile World Congress. But the one before that was our first Women in Tech event. So we became at that point one of the largest in the region. And we decided with great power comes great responsibility. So let's do this. There's a lot of talk about the glass ceiling. Let's just have only women on stage. So one of my right hand, actually, our innovation manager, she was the host. Only women on stage, only the startups that were pitching, all women founders, which was a first for all of them because normally there's some guy somewhere, apparently I heard later. But I found out very interesting things in the process, and I would like to kind of hear from your side what you think is the glass ceiling is. Do you think the glass ceiling is something how is it orchestrated? Is it something that is happening a lot internally, that the women are saying to themselves and not letting themselves do things? Or is it most definitely some women that are really trying their best and men or social norms are holding them back? Because I'm very interested in hearing your answer on that.
Yeah, well, I don't believe, Luva, that we do have one right answer to that question, right? Because it's all contextualized. What I what I know is that if you do not have in big corporations or in certain societies, if you do not have an intention to integrate women, the higher they go into their rankings of leadership. And if you do not have role models here for more women to feel inspired to go, and I'm talking about women, but it can be any diversity, right? It can be any other gender diversity. It can be people of color. It can be even an accent. I'm a Brazilian. I have a different way of expressing myself. It's a cultural nuance of diversity as well, right? If you do not have role models, if you do not have an intention committed by senior leadership to drive change and equality, people tend to choose what you know. Yeah. So if you know someone if you know someone that did an amazing work in the past, you are going to put your bets and bring in these people and promoting these people. So you do need to have very clear KPIs around, how can we help the recruiting system to be able to drive this diversity? How can we help the performance metrics so you enable certain behaviors to be seen as sign of leadership and power, right? How can you help to promote more women on stage? As you said, many times you just see the guys there talking and giving a word, or investor relators, you do see that the guys are talking. How can we enable a bit more of a feminine voice coming up? So there are a couple of things and small actions that you can take that starts to take out the heaviness about having to talk about it.
Yeah.
So what I and there are a lot that you can also facilitate and take ownership of doing. And I get back here to the nanny, right? I could have said, well, I do not want to leave my babies with the nanny, or I don't want to take this extra assignment when my daughter is a 1-year-old and I will need to stay 2 weeks a month abroad. You need to manage also your guilt. Is much more guilt management than time management. Is that what is going to give me more energy? Is it to be advancing my career right now and still being a great mother? Or do I really need to stop my career for a while and dedicate a bit more to those new human beings? So you need to know what feels right for you. As a father, the same thing, and I do not say that only as a mother, right?
Yeah.
What what we can see is if we observe, uh, usually women take that as a heavier burden on themselves, parenting, or
Why do you think women take it like more than men? Obviously, many reasons, but obviously, I want to hear from you.
I do believe that is much more society related because I didn't feel that burden when I was living in Sweden. You do not have the
Oh, really?
expectations from society that is the women taking the burden, right? Well, you do have in other societies you live with.
So you really feel that pressure if you compare it Sweden to compare to Switzerland.
Yeah, huge difference,
Wow.
and also that's where also the corporate world can help a lot, right? Because if you do have ability to work from home, or if you can be more flexible, and if my work requires that I travel a lot, can I work from home Mondays and Fridays so I can be closer to my family and be have more FaceTime with them, etc. So I believe that. I never asked for permission to carve out my time and work and make it work for my family because I could never compartmentalize my life. It's not that I'm a work person here and a mom here. I like to take out those and blur the lines between work and personal life. Um, and and sharing my experience during with the network at Nike that I co-chair with the younger women that are still thinking, do I have kids now or later? Do I get this promotion now or do I have a family? It's that, well, for me it worked to have a nanny. Find something that works for you, but live in peace with that. Do not blame the company nor the society for the choice you make as
Yeah.
well, right? So find a way to be in peace with the decision you make, and move on. Being at home will not take off your confidence that you can later start up from where you left. Just to make sure that probably you're not going to ascend all the time. If you choose to stay at home, you will need to
Yeah.
have more of a labyrinth career path. But that's okay. That's also okay. Yeah.
So it's very much guilt management, which you're explaining. So that nanny part, I missed that in the beginning. I was super interested. How many hours? What are like? Did the nanny move with you to Switzerland and the Netherlands? How did you find the nanny? Can you tell us more about the nanny? I'm very interested.
Yeah, so she was with me for 10 years actually. So she and in Brazil, you do have quite nannies a lot. So her mother worked in my sister's house already, and so we did an au pair agreement. So she would stay 9 months with me in Sweden.
How old was the nanny back then?
She was 19 when she went first to be with me. So she was 9 months with me, then 3 months back to renew her visa, then 9 months with me, 3 months back. So she did that for 9 years,
What
for
did
10
you
years.
do in those 3 months then?
It was usually holidays for the kids. So we
Oh,
would
okay.
find a way to bring the kids back to or my parents or the parents of Daniel. So we always managed. It takes a village to parenting, right? So make sure that you tap into your friends and organize that. Well, if they can take care of the kids this week, and you find ways. You just
Yeah.
have to intentionally be with your mindset that, well, we will sort it out together, instead of saying, well, I cannot commit to this role because I have the kids, because then you anchor your mindset. So that I was very lucky that Daniel, my ex-husband, had always been quite much about, well, we'll find a solution. Let's make sure that we live the life we want to live.
So 10 years she would do this 9 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
Can I ask why she did that? Especially different countries. Isn't that so intense for her?
Well, actually, she quite liked it because she could learn different cultures. She was very close to my family, very close to my kids. My kids became her kids, and she became almost my elderly daughter, right? My
Yeah.
kid. And at the end, my kids were almost also embarrassed of having a nanny because they were already quite old. And I would say she's my nanny now. But she learned a language, so she learned English while she was with us. She didn't have English before, so she could also save some money to bring back to her family when she got back full time now here in Brazil.
Clear. And so that means that she, just for the finances part, for me to understand, is that very expensive, or what can you say the numbers? How much does it cost? Or because obviously people are thinking nannies must be like not cheap, and how many hours are they donating? Because that, do they have an like evening life? Can they go out? How does that work?
So it's expensive, but it doesn't break the bank, right? So when you think about, well, how much money am I willing to, if I take a bigger job, probably the difference in salary of a bigger job, I can fully dedicate this difference in salary to a nanny. It's more about, I didn't necessarily make much money while during the time that I had the nannies, because the money that I would get extra that kept me growing in my jobs, they will be dedicated to traveling the nanny Brazil back, to paying the
Yeah.
nanny and all of that. So it's expensive, yes, it is, but at the same time, does it pay off if you're two persons working, two persons with career, and you want to have the best uh, quality time with your kids the moment you are home, because the nanny also helps to organize the kids' bedrooms. They help to wash the kids' clothes, to keep things organized at home, to cook food for them. So we had more quality time with the kids when we would arrive home, which is a great thing to take off the guilt and
Yeah.
really spend a great time with the family. Um, Now, well, the amount of time they dedicate to the family, it differs quite a lot. So we always had an upfront agreement with her, and if she needed a bit more time, we would have. We always wanted her to be with the kids when we were not there. Every time we were there, well, she could do whatever she wanted. Uh, Go out on an evening with her friends. Weekends would be fully for herself. Even if she didn't have whatever to do, she would be by herself, right? So we didn't want to have someone to be a new parent for the kids. It was more about, well, be as a support for our family, but when we are
Yeah.
here, we assume back the roles of being father and mother.
Clear. So
Or
it's only for those empty hours.
Yes, exactly, and help with doing things that while kids are in school, cook their dinner, and organize that their backpacks are set, that they sit down during the study hours and so on. And
Yeah.
those small things, they help you so much. Never underestimate it. It's like micro actions that you can take that will add so much to your own energy level, because if you do not have that energy level up, it's quite hard to cope with a corporate life, or with your own business, and also with the family life.
So that means that technically what you're explaining right now is just the nanny's taking over all the mundane tasks of parenting, but you were actually still the parent, spending the quality time, making sure memories were made and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So that is, and she would also take a role uh, within being the authority figure when we were not there, right? So that is also important, that the kids do respect that if someone says, well, you do not do that because it can be impose danger to the kid, that they respect this authority figure. as well. And we fully trusted her. We fully trust her. One example is that right now I'm in Brazil because my dad is sick. Not sick. He had a stroke, and we are talking to my nanny, to the person that has been with me for 10 years, to see if she can also give support now to my father, if she's willing to do that, because he will need someone to be close to him
Available.
on his recovery. So it's more about, well, it's a person that is very close to us. We do love her, and regardless if it's taking care of a kid, she's a caretaker. She can also take care of someone recovering as well.
Okay, last question on nanny. Obviously, we don't have to talk the whole time about nannies, but just last question for me. The recruitment of the nanny, how is it? Just people, or do you have to look out for something?
Yeah, so we did. It's great that you asked that, because there are tricks here and there. We did try with the two au pair agencies before we found our au pair, our nanny, right? And uh, somehow, even if we did have a remote interview with the recruitment of the au pairs, both that we recruited through the agencies did not work that well, um, because actually there were very different interests. You need to see if someone really glues with how you operate as a family, right? So, and what the advice that I can give is that do not lose the faith of the benefit of what an au pair can bring if the first one or the second one doesn't work. Keep on working and finding the right partner, because when you find the right partner, it's a really an amazing help to your family life. So only the third one worked well, uh, and I my mindset when I went through the first that didn't work, I said, well, probably we shouldn't have an any. I should rethink my job, and I'm happy that we didn't. We said, well, let's try once more. Let's try once more.
Great. Yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into anything. We already went quite deep, and it helps a lot. So, shifting back to the women initiative you did within Nike, um, do you think, because not a lot of companies have something like that, is it something you initiated, or was it something you did together with someone? Why do you think you had to do it? Why not just focus on yourself or something like that?
Yeah. So and Nike did have for quite a while a women network globally in Portland, at the global headquarters, but nothing in Netherlands or in Europe in general, right? And when I joined, it was, well, coming from Sweden, then within Sweden to Switzerland, but then I was still with Kraft Foods, and the the food industry, or especially at Kraft, you do have quite of a diverse leadership, and diversity at all levels, right? Gender diversity, etc. And when you move into the sports industry or into the retail industry, and when I looked up at Nike executive team and the Nike European leadership, you just see guys. And I came in willing to, well, I know that I would like to grow, etc., but I do not see people like me there. So you start to second guess, right? Will I be there once
Yeah.
or not? And nobody can give you that answer. And instead of just waiting for someone to give an answer, the same people that were on levels lower than myself, they would also be looking at my level and the level up and do not see much representation. So the idea to start in Europe was more about, well, there were one other colleague of mine that also was interested. We said, well, let's start a network and organize events that we're going to discuss exactly that. Well, um, returning from maternity leave, or how how to tackle if you're excluded from a conversation. So small things that we started to organize and network or stage presence, because we could see that women, when they went to stage, they would not take their voice to be heard. So we organized a couple of events where we would give TED talk like TED training to women, so they would have a better stage presence. So we worked a lot on personal branding, on having a voice, developing a voice, and making sure that instead of trying to change the corporate culture, how can we ourselves take ownership of conquering that presence and own it before someone tells it's yours. You see?
I like that, taking ownership. Do you have any stories that you can share of women that changed going through the process?
Oh, we do have. I believe we have lots of stories, especially that what the network did and does. That I believe it's super powerful is that you do connect. You do connect people with the same topic in mind, right? With a certain theme. So I do receive daily emails or phone calls from other women that are going through a situation that they heard me talking on one event and say, look, I'm just about to apply for that role, and this is the panel that interviewing me. Do you have any advice of how can I make sure that I'll cause a great impression? Or someone is changing departments, and in that new department they're just guys. What is the behavior asked? Or so it helps a lot to make sure that you establish the connection a bit more organically. So you do have someone to turn to if you need advice or mentorship or coaching. Other thing that helps a lot, Luba, is that how can I have a voice for them if needed, right? So I participate on talent planning sessions. How can if someone says, well, this person cannot because they are just returning from maternity leave, I do have a strong voice saying that, and what's wrong with that? So I do own also to challenge beliefs that are quite ingrained. People don't do that with a bad intention. It's more about, let's make sure that we challenge when those beliefs are coming up. So people say, well, nothing wrong with that, and then things go wrong, right? So taking an active role right now, that has helped a lot.
And how does Nike think about the network that you created and the events? Do they support you? Do they give you extra funds? How did they support you in that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, the fund was the biggest challenge. And right now we are fully funded by Nike. We did not necessarily need to ask favors. In the beginning, we would ask guests as a favor, can you come and talk? Nowadays, we can pay our guests when they come and give a training, or they come as a guest speaker. What I love, and my co-chair also loves, is that we love to bring people from different industries and outside in, not to be too much poison in one cultural environment. So you can give examples of what could it be, what if we would do a bit like that. We do have full commitment from talent development team as well, that they use our members as focus groups many times, that they need to develop a new training. So they go first towards our members and ask the members to have a strong voice, and so on. So I do believe that there is a huge benefit of complementary actions around what officially the HR corporate strategy can do, and what we can organically say, that's what we would love to have. If the company cannot give, we do it ourselves. But there is a mutual respect for how to keep a healthy friction that I love to have.
It sounds almost like you are an entrepreneur who created something and you are asking for a subsidy from the government, and whether the government gives it or not, it doesn't matter, it's going to happen.
Yes, exactly, because there is an appetite for that service. Yes, so we cannot
Yeah.
deny it. Yes, so just if whatever the government in that case would like to do it or not, or subsidize or not, we will do it, because there is an appetite for that kind of service. And I love to see how the network gets more and more strength right now, especially after all of the personal branding activities and seminars and webinars we did, all of um, the general training on taking out biased behavior. So it's been quite a positive energy
Are
back
you
to me.
are you looking to actually create that content and put it into like an education portal or something internally, or where does the content go?
Yeah, well, actually, we do share with the network, whatever it's a webinar that we pay or invite, and we share, and we have an archive with all of that content. I didn't think about putting that on a training or something, but the HR team does have access to it, and I myself, I also participate on external networks that promote women leadership. So many times I'm invited to also, can you talk about that subject? And that's where I can share quite a lot of some tangible examples of what we did that worked.
If you want, we can talk after podcast. I can explain how we set up some things for
That would be
ourselves.
great. That would be great.
Because
Yeah.
it helps if there's more of a digital thing. We noticed that so when we were doing our events, like maybe the maximum went to like 1,000 people, but then let's say this podcast, it goes way more, way bigger reach. People in the US listen to it, and it's just also nice to grab back to the content. So I remember when we first started the events, it was a very high focus on actually digitizing all the content, making sure everything was recorded from every angle. But we can discuss about that later, not relevant right now.
Yeah, let's do that, because that would be actually a great outcome also of the talk.
We are almost last question for this one. But as general manager of Converse, or like within Nike, one of the general managers, I can assume, was it then easier for you to take the initiative to do this, or like push behind this, make it as big as it is? Or do you think it didn't matter which position you had, it would have been pushed through?
Yeah, well, actually, I started it when I was in the procurement role at Nike, and the other person that is my co-chair also had the same level position that I had at the time. Um, we we were already one of the few women in leaders at that level, and we did have already a very good credibility with the top leadership of Europe, right? So when we said we do need your support to set up this network, can we have your commitment? And when we anchored that, we could start executing. Regardless of having that anchored or not, we would start to do something. We just needed to understand what is the scale and how much can we do. The benefit to your question around did the role matter or not, I think that the benefit of being on a high position is that you can have a very good point of contact with the leadership on things that the company is committed or already doing that we do not know as an employee, or not. So you could have both way discussions and activate support in case we would need to communicate on the intranet, or in case we would need to block a certain venue to execute this event. So you need someone that will have enough credibility and to go and ask for the things. But I do believe as well, and that's what we brought later on, that the core team, we do have approximately 6 people that are part of our core group that do set up what is the schedule of events and what is the strategy of what we do as a network. And then we have several volunteers that during the events help in volunteering and executing on the day. Yeah. The core team does need to have a very different, a more diverse setup, including men as well, because many times, and back to the nanny discussion, right? One day I was talking. I was given a talk to a group of 20 people. We usually did speak up sessions, and someone said, well, raised the arm and said, well, it's very easy for you to have a nanny because you are a senior director. I'm still an analyst, and I want to have a kid, and I cannot pay for a nanny. And that immediately made me not relatable, right? And that's where we started to, based on that question, to start to rethink about, well, let's not put only the senior leaders as role models. Let's put the entry-level employees as role models as well, because how they tackle that situation on maternity is very different of how I tackle it right now. Having the means to have a support system behind, yeah. So that question of the nanny really brought a lot of discussion at the time to, we do need to be more diverse and put ourselves in the feet of who really needs the help right now.
Yeah. So it actually, partially why I asked it, so that means that technically, based on what you just said, it doesn't matter what position you have within the corporate. If you want to create something, there is more pull in it if you're in a higher position to align with leadership. But technically, you could start and then see if you get somebody from leadership to align with you as well. So then anybody could start something which you started internally within the corporate.
Absolutely, and I'm a huge fan of starting. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's going to be noisy at the beginning. Just cut through the noise. It was super noisy in the beginning because it's different, right? You start to open up discussions that has been treated as taboo for too long. People didn't dare to talk about it. Didn't dare to talk that women were not promoted because they were pregnant or because. And you start to talk about that, about, well, our approach was not to blame the company or blame society. It was about how can we own together this discussion. And if we do that together without finger pointing and what part can you own, what part can we probably change together, it's an easier discussion. But it has been quite noisy. Right now we are past that phase already.
Nice. Okay, so then we're kind of going into the last questions now. Obviously, I cannot ignore it, but Corona hit quite hard now. I think I'm like in 6-7 weeks in quarantine now. Luckily, we're mostly digital, and not because of Corona. We actually started that transition last year in June already. We're quite a small company. I think our team was around 28 at the time. And yet it took us a bit over 6 months to transition the company fully digitally. And then January was the beta kind of launch of digital. And then February, we really adapted the whole digital experience with the whole team, even scaled down our physical office. But you obviously manage a much bigger company. How prepared were you guys? How is the whole impact going on you? Obviously, you don't have to commute, so I'm assuming it's a little bit easier on that side. But how are you guys handling Corona and what's happening on your side?
So I believe that it was a much easier transition for my team than it has been for the broader company in general, right? And I will explain the reasons why. So as I mentioned, I'm responsible for the north of Europe, and the team is spread in 11 countries with offices in Germany and in Stockholm and the Netherlands. We did have offices in other in other countries, but we had closed in the last years those offices to centralize people in those countries that I just mentioned. And my team is the only one that is a consolidation of 11 countries. All of the other teams, they are London team is London is all together. French team is Paris all together. Italy team is based in Milano. A Spanish team is based in Barcelona, right? So what the difference is that my team is already used to have weekly meetings over video conferencing. That's how is normal life for us.
And what software do you use then?
We use Blue Jeans as a company.
I don't know that one. Is that something new or?
Right now I'm having, I think it's much easier to use Zoom than Blue Jeans. So right now we are kind of, we still use Blue Jeans because it's the one that we corporately, we use it within the company, right? But whatever other meetings I'm having, I'm using quite a lot of Zoom as well. So overall, the way we operate has always been remotely, and our set of countries as well, especially if you look Scandinavia and Germany, they are highly digitalized already. So lots of our business already is done digitally. The way we engage with our accounts, the way we engage with our customers. So actually, it didn't change that much. If I look into my Italian colleagues, for them has been a huge change because they are used to go to the office every day, to have the face-to-face meeting, to welcome the customers physically. We did have the advantage of being quite spread as a set of clusters that I'm responsible for, and it was just that we couldn't travel that much. And we cannot travel that much. But apart from that, it's the main hurdle is how to cope with everybody kids at home, because you have all the kids in the background.
Well, they are. It's now like the 22nd of April. They are now slowly starting to reopen schools. Well, at least in the Netherlands, they're going to reopen the under 12 years. After May, the May vacation. So that should help with that, I think.
Yeah, so my kids are still, so what we did that helped quite a lot is that since the kids are homeschooling, are with the remote schooling, they went to Sweden and they are taking the classes from Sweden on their school based in Netherlands. So at least they can stay a bit more with dad during the period that they're learning from home, which also it's an interesting phase for them. They are a bit more.
But isn't education different? Like, is it the same level? Are they learning the same things?
No, they are learning still from their school in Netherlands, but it's everything remotely, right? So they are just taking their remote classes from based out of Sweden.
Right.
Instead of being in Netherlands with me. So I'm having a bit more freedom right now, and it's enabling them to be a bit with dad. And Sweden is not on lockdown, so they also have more freedom to go and do sports outdoors.
Isn't that? Don't you find that crazy? Because Sweden is one of those countries that didn't impose the crazy lockdown.
Yeah, and it has a reason to be, Lupa, because the way society works, there is already a natural social distancing. People do not come that close. You do keep a bit more of a distance to strangers or people you do not know. You do not, when you are lining up on a supermarket, you do not come as close as you do in Netherlands. You keep naturally a distance. So society tried right now. The government tried to do a more intelligent lockdown, and it has been working. And it's not that it's not willing to revisit in case it doesn't work. But right now there are less restrictions than the rest of Europe and the rest of the world.
Interesting. So pretty much, they're just studying Dutch school, but they're in Sweden right now, and then it's less strict than here. But Cool. I think we are slowly kind of getting to the end. Before we finish, I always have like simple questions, which is, what kind of books are you reading, and what kind of books would you recommend for our listeners?
It's funny. Right now, I love to read several books simultaneously. So I do have that habit since I'm young. And right now, I'm just reading a book called The Outward Mindset, and it tells a bit about how can you take full ownership for the context of whatever happens in your life, right? So it's quite an interesting because it also gives you examples of things that you would probably blame on the context or on the outside world, but you should how things can be very different if you try uh, to own the change, not own what is happening, but to own the change. Yeah, so that is outward mindset. I'm reading a book that is quite of a very light novel that is called Nine Perfect Strangers, and the book is about nine strangers that go to a spa and all with a different intention in that spa, and how and the book discusses about how very heavy topics that they go through, but in a way that is very light. So it helps
Yeah.
you to analyze heavy topics within you on a very light and even a funny way. Um, uh, and the third book I'm reading right now, it's probably an indication of what's coming next. Is your first 100 days. So I'm getting prepared to probably move jobs, but it's still not confirmed. And I just before that happens, I'm just studying a bit. What can I do on the next 100 days when I move a role and change role?
What kind of role do you think you'd want to do? Do you want to do corporate or start your own business or something like that?
Yeah. So right now I'm looking into I love that it does have when it has a global component to it, right? I do like that to leverage the ability that I have of working cross cultures and cross countries. I really am passionate about the digital space. So whatever does have a digital component to it, about how can we change business models of things or industries
Yeah.
that did not develop that much. And coming from a consumer space, I do know how to digitally connect with my consumers on a way. Can I bring that to other industries or to a non corporate world as well, and be able to facilitate and shape the future of how some processes are set. So I'm looking into that field.
Yeah.
And back to your question about, is there a book that I would advise to the readers? I'm a big I love to read leadership books. I'm a big fan of leadership books, and I cannot give the name of one, but I write quite recently. I started to listen to also several podcasts. So there are a couple of podcasts that I would highly recommend, and it's from the Harvard Business Review. The topics
Yeah.
that they are tackling are quite relevant for if you're on setting up your own business, or if you do have curiosity on a certain industry, because cross-industry pollination is super important whatever you are. And
Yeah.
they give you like a 30 minutes capsule of very relevant themes, and I would highly recommend they're available on Spotify as well.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then last question, which is any tips or tricks or any last thoughts or nice story to tell for founders or people working in corporate right now? Yeah, anything last thoughts that you can tell them?
Yeah, well, I what helps me to keep on going, even if things are tough, or to keep centered when things are going too well, is to have a certain routine that are really leveling up my energy, right? So my routine is that every day I wake up, I do my hair, I do my makeup, I go up on my heels, and I start a new day, right? I start that day as that is the day that everything can happen within those 24 hours, right? So I keep that routine of setting up the day, starting the day with the energy, and claiming that day. So what I would give as a tip is that find whatever small ritual works for you every day, because if you do that, you just have to do one more day, one more day, one more day, and then suddenly things start to turn the way that you really want. It's a lot about your state of mind, much more than the moment itself. And another tip is that, well, you are enough, right? And I always say that you are enough. You do not necessarily need to do exactly as the other person. You have something that is unique. Make sure that you know that and believe in that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a really good one to close on. I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been a little over 2 hours, but super grateful. Thank you so much. And maybe I'll see you in the future again for a dinner or something.
A dinner at my house so you can talk to my kids.
If you liked this episode, you can check out our most recent one here. And if you haven't already, make sure you click here to subscribe and see the next one. But if you're interested in more tips and tricks, then make sure to join our Facebook group where you can find thousands of like-minded people and you get direct access and support to any business question from the entire startup funding event team.